Do you want to see how we rigged the spacenet at GGBY? Check it out in this episode of How Not to Highline. Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks and welcome to GGBY 2018. We're going to show you how we set up the spacenet. We did not get footage of it while we set it up because it was a hell of a lot of work. But we'll show you kind of how we set up the rig and how we kept it safe. So we put it here in the Wet Beaver Cove instead of way out there in the middle of nowhere in order to have all the high lines that this area allows us to have. We did not have to eliminate any high lines in order to have it here. Now this net is approximately about 5 meters below the top, and that allows us to put a slackline above, not a slackline, but a jelly line we call it, above the net in order to hold up some of the corners to reduce the force on the 5 main legs. So one of our primary focuses was to stay safe, considering there's 20 people walking around these cliff edges trying to get this net up. One of the first things we did was we set up these bolts, about 4 of them in this wall, in order to put this rope on here as a via ferrata that you can clip your personal anchor to as you walk along this edge in order to get down to this cave where one of the anchors are. Then we picked 5 of the best spots we could in order to put 4 bolt glue-in bolt anchors, which we have in a separate video as a glue-in bolt example. And this is what we rigged our anchors off of. Now, 3 of our anchors have these wood hang frames in order to lift the anchor off of the ground. It makes it a little bit easier to get on and off, and it really reduces the risk of abrasion, which is usually our #1 risk. Now, 2 of our anchors are quite a bit off level, a little bit higher, so we opted to just pad the hell out of it and not use hang frames. As you can see that our anchors are up there and right there. So they're quite a bit higher. The 3 lower anchors, which is the level I'm standing at now, have these hang frames. Now you can see the black strap here is what holds the base from kicking out, and then we have a red strap that goes from there down as a stabilizer. And then when you get the, we did BFKs for everything, and that clips to a double bomber ring. Now this is a pretty fancy way of holding up that ring, and it goes through a hole up there and crisscrosses until you tie a knot right there. And then you can adjust the height of those rings to where you want them to be. And as you can see, this anchor rope is not touching the rocks at all. Okay, so on 4 of the 5 lines we have dynamometers. On the main leg we have Matt out there. He just slid out and it put 5-ish kilonewtons on the main leg. Before he got on, it was only about 4, and most of the force is on this leg here. We do have 4 layers of spider silk. This one has a lot less force, and then these are under a kilonewton. I think all 3 of these are under a kilonewton. But we do have 4 legs of spider silk, and that makes me feel pretty good. These legs break at 42 kilonewtons. This is Vectrin. And so we have, most of the time we have a 10-to-1 safety ratio on just the one leg, and then quadruple redundancy. Now the goal originally was to have these 2 legs hold the same amount of force, and these 2 be backup. So that's called parallel redundancy, but you need 2 legs to back up 2 legs if you have force on both of these. Now we do have 4 web locks holding, so 1 web lock holding each leg. This one is on a soft release, the main one, which is on the dynamometer. The next ones we can detension while the net is still there, and maybe drop the spider silk or loosely clip it in. But the way we get 4 web locks on this anchor is we have to stagger. Here we have 2 or 3 climbing slings that are in a U shape around the master point. Rigging plates did not make a lot of sense for us here. We actually tried a rigging plate up there, and it really didn't help much. Wow. Okay, so they just jumped off and off the top net onto the bottom one, and it hit 7 or 8 kilonewtons. So that's still pretty good for safety. It did not hit 7 kilonewtons when he just jumped right there. But anyways, we have some Amsteel loops that we are also able to stagger that is actually directly to the BFK, and same with this web lock here. These shackles are zip tied so they cannot accidentally come undone, and no web lock is pushing up against another web lock. Now all of these tails are tied off directly to the BFK over here with some frost knots, which is the strongest knot you can really do with any webbing, but it's really important with Vectrin. It would be, in a perfect world, nice if we took this tail and put it up the web lock and then tied it around, similar to the way we did this one, except this tail should go up and then around, in order so if it slipped, it would slip straight before locking off. These technically would have a tendency to slip and possibly not stay orientated correctly in the web locks. However, I'm not too worried about it. The spider silk has never slipped on me. It's got quite a bit of just its age. It's not that slippery. I've just never ever had a problem with it in the 7 years I've used it. This also has 4 glue-in bolts, like all of them do, to the BFK, to the 2 bomber rings, and the shackles holding those rings in place. And then all the stuff is pretty much clipped to this, except for some of the staggered web locks back here. Now the top line here, we use the existing bolts because they are super good enough. The bolts themselves are fine, but you can see how the chains have, they're steel, they're not stainless steel, so they tend to corrode over time. But the bolts are bomber. I'm not too worried about the chains. We are sharing the bolts for both the wet beaver line, which doesn't have too much force on it because we have lift on there, and I'd say it probably doesn't see more than 5-6 kilonewtons. And then on here, our jelly line, we have another BFK coming off of it. You can see this giant square quick link going to the SMC rigging plates. We have 2 of them for redundancy. The same concept with the rope here. But you see the way the rigging plate is orientated, it really doesn't serve much more of a purpose than just 2 bomber rings. And then our SlackSnap soft shackle backing up this bomber square quick link. You can see here actually how awkward it makes it when you put the slings on here, even in a U shape going around this web lock, how it smashes it. Makes it really hard to operate this. And the dynamometer, this webbing here is pushing up this against the dynamometer, so it's not actually reading accurately. It's actually not helping at all. But this here is tied off most correctly out of all of them, and then the tail beyond that is tied off back at the back of the anchor. Now these 3 lines do help in a couple ways. We got to put up Ethan's Amsteel net above Andy's net and still use it as a jelly. So it's a fancy jelly line that reduces about 50% of the force off of the other lines by just having the 4 corners of Ethan's net. We have ropes on each corner with gree-grees, and we can adjust how much tension it's holding. Now this line is probably holding for 5 kilonewtons. This one's probably 1 or 2, and this one is 1. But 3 layers of spider silk is pretty bomber for this jelly line. So on this BFK, we didn't use a hang frame, but you still want it off of the edge. So we have a mat, and then we have some firewood underneath that we built up, and of course another mat. So this one was a little bit tricky in the fact that it is over the edge. You can see how far those web blocks are right here. Makes it hard to tension, and this is one of the legs that did need to be tensioned. Not every leg on a space net needs to be pulled. If you pull 1 or 2, it makes obviously the rest of them tight. Now we're only at 5.1-ish kilonewtons on the system with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people on it. So I'm pretty happy with those results. You can see how this dynamometer sits flat, and then all these extensions push past it. This is really important how this is orientated in order for this to work properly. Now, I don't agree with having this on a master point. I like having it on one leg, the one that's holding the most force, because these dynamometers are only rated for 30 kilonewtons. The spider silk's rated for 42. So there's no point in putting it as a master point, and then your whole system would be limited to just the 30 kilonewtons. Whereas in theory, this force spider leg anchor, depending on how you want to slice and dice it, is at least 100 kilonewtons strong. The problem is I can't get the top two legs to be evenly tensioned at every anchor, which does limit my parallel redundancy. However, with our forces this low, it's not worth trying to mess with it anymore. But you can see here we have a soft release on the main line, which will be really nice when we start de-rigging tomorrow or the other day. So here is Ethan's net. He's got giant Amsteel on literally everything up here. He's got these twist shackles with these titanium rings in order to keep the strands together. He threaded soft shackles inside of, this is how he connected it to the Amsteel. He just splices everything, pretty rad. These are LEDs, which look really cool at night. This thing is all lit up. And then he's got these thimbles on here and two soft shackles in order to hold up this ring. And attached to the rings are ropes on grigris, so we can adjust the tension that we want this to see in case we have too many people, or it's just nice to be able to adjust things. You can see how he made his net. He spliced the gray in there, came through here, spliced, all the blue goes through the center. It's took him, I think he said 2 years to make this. Of course, he didn't work on it every day, but this was quite the project in order to make this 3/8 inch Amsteel net. Okay, so pretty much all the anchors are the same. Andy has these rings on here, which aren't exactly bomber, so we backed him up to soft shackles. Soft shackles are actually not seeing any weight, but I'm sure glad they're there if these things start to bend. They are steel, so they would bend before they break. Then we have our shackles. We only have 3 connections on each corner. How we did that is the main is holding ideally a sew-in loop, which makes it a lot easier. And then this web lock, it's kind of an interesting idea. I want to slack snap it for sure. This is the main line, and then you can see in there that we put the tail tension on the tail as well. So instead of this being a knot and us pulling both legs, we use the web lock and we double wrapped it. So it's kind of just helps hold the force, like these 2 strands. If the top one broke, not sure what would happen. We will find out in SlackSnap. And then the bottom one is either in its own web lock, or this, in this case, we were lucky enough to have a sew-in loop right here. Now, it's really important when you have a net like this, especially when a bunch of people are getting on and off and running around and jumping around, to have a runner rope. So we tied it to the master point on each of the 5 corners. You can see all these ropes going all the way around. So at any point you can be clipped in with your personal anchor that you came out here with. If any of one of the 5 legs were to break, this thing would go limp. You wouldn't die if you're clipped into the system, but if you're not clipped into the system, you could fly off and die. 5 legs on a space net is not redundant. It's 5 points of failure that you can have. So space nets are not exactly the safest thing in the world, and they see significantly more force than your average slackline. So people ask all the time how to rig, how to make a space net. And here's an extra piece of paracord. I can show you an example. So you don't ever want to cross over a bunch of pieces and then create your hitches and loops, because then your foot is just going to get caught inside of this, and that would suck. So you have to, every time you pass something, you pull, and you just go like that all the way around. And that's what makes this net take so long to rig. I can do 2 at a time right there. You can go back the opposite way and come this way. And this is more of a random pattern. There are ways to make designs, but we added 2 miles of paracord to this net. Oh, mostly Andy did, before we got married on it. So that's why it's so tightly woven. Took him about a month to do it, and it makes it a lot easier to walk on. A lot of nets are have giant holes in them. One of the nice things is this has some what looks like 9mm rope going to I'd call it like the skeleton structure, and then this would be all the tendons and ligaments in order to have some strength in the middle parts. The paracord itself is pretty strong. I mean, it does hold 550 pounds of strength technically, minus knots. But this much paracord is holding, everything is holding you. So it's like virtually unbreakable, just like a soft release holds. Like the weakest webbing with soft release is like 14,000 pounds. So same idea with a space net. If you don't fall off the damn thing, you should be just fine. Now, once you get to the end here, you can basically clove hitch it and then do some hitches and stuff, and then just let the tail dangle. And then all this is filled in a little bit tighter now.
Rigging space nets can be fun, but you could be tempted to jump off of them. Therefore, you shouldn't rig space nets. Oh, fuck!